What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the 2013 mixtape by Lil Wayne. Basically, this project is called Dedication 5 and it came out in the late summer of 2013. The thing about this particular mixtape is just the fact that Lil Wayne was somewhat past his prime on this particular project. Now, not in terms of his lyricism and stuff like that, but in terms of like the apex of what music was on and rap music as far as this particular pitch kind of happened. Lil Wayne was not as dominant on like mainstream charts and things like that as he was back in 2008 and 2006 and 2004, some of those type times. And it wasn't because he went to prison like what happened with Ti or something like that. It's just the fact that like the culture was shifting. Things were more about Future and Meek Mill and some of those type folks. The Weekend was getting ready to blossom. Drake was blowing up. Some of those type folks. Just the tides were starting to shift, and Lil Wayne was not necessarily a has been. I mean, he was 30 around this time. He was still doing things right and that sort of stuff, but he just didn't have like the massive kind of Lil Wayne for the most part just didn't have the massive hit that he had back in like the 2000s with something like a Millie or Lollipop or something like that. Now, I'm Not a Human Being 2 did pretty solidly enough back in early 2013. That was a pretty stellar album, I'd have to say, and it did have a hit. Like, it did have that hit song with Drake and Future on there. I forget the name of that particular song, but it was a pretty good hit back. It was like a top 10 single back in early 2013, but for the rest of that album, it didn't really do quite as highly as it needed to, but it did have some gems on there, I'd have to say. But this is Lil Wayne in the fall of 2013, which was kind of a quiet time for him. He was getting ready to gear up to drop the Carter 5, which didn't come out until way out in 2018. But originally it was supposed to come out in the spring of 2014, but that just didn't manifest as far as that kind of happened. But this was just kind of an interim type road as far as that was going to particularly kind of happen before we got to that project. But I look after it, these were kind of seldom times for Lil Wayne, just because of the fact that it's just some interesting choices of beats on here. I like the concept of seeing some of these. It was interesting that Lil Wayne knew enough about 2013 pop and music as far as that particularly kind of happened. But a lot of these, I kind of feel like the reason why this is gonna get a rave score. I'm gonna give this mixtape like a 10 out of 10. I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. This is gonna get a 10 out of 10 as far as that pitch kind of happens. Definitely one of this project is definitely one of Lil Wayne's best. But I would just have to say the thing about this particular project is just the fact that the beats on this particular album are just different from the style that Lil Wayne was having in his prime. So these are just songs that don't these are songs that just don't necessarily feel as grafted for Lil Wayne as far as that pitch kind of particularly kind of happens. I mean, I feel like some of these are, but just a song like Fucking Problems by ASAP Rocky just doesn't really feel like a fitting kind of Lil Wayne song. And there's some ones on here like Levels by Meek Mill feels more of like a Meek Mill song more than a Lil Wayne song. You Ain't Even Know, the Rocco song kind of feels more of like, I mean, that's a pretty good one. That was kind of more classic Southern rap as far as that pitch kind of happens. But Lil Wayne doesn't necessarily pick full blown kind of Southern beats on here, which is kind of where Lil Wayne's from as far as that pitch kind of happens. Whether he's from New Orleans or when he's hanging out in Miami, Florida, some of those type pitches, it just doesn't have the same taste as it did back in 2008 and 2006 and some of those type times, which is more primary Lil Wayne. Just the folks, he's not necessarily sampling like Paul Wall and Jeezy and T.I. and folks like that, and some of those type folks from the previous times, just Rick Ross and some of those type folks. These are newer folks, and that's just kind of the amalgamation behind it. So it's not necessarily a bad project, it's just the fact that some of these sounds are more trendy to what was kind of popping in early 2013. You get folks that are just a different taste as the styles have started to shift, and I feel like these are good songs, and Lil Wayne definitely eviscerates them. To talk about that, he definitely has some lyrical barbs. He's still primary Lil Wayne in that sort of pitch, but these just don't feel as grafted to him as like the ones from 2007 and 2008. So it's kind of the concept where he maintained his prime. It's just the fact that these songs just don't feel quite as melded. But this album is going to get a 10 out of 10. So we'll go ahead and talk about some of the songs on here that are new, because Lil Wayne does a pretty awesome pitch about Dedication 5. Is just the fact that it has a series of new songs by Lil Wayne. So normally he just raps to like instrumentals as far as that pitch kind of happens, but I definitely like the concept of getting some new songs on here. Some pretty awesome stuff to kind of have that, and a lot of these are pretty good. There's 7 new songs on here, but five of them are ones I recommend. So I just would have to say about that, that's some good concepts. Basically, the only 2 new songs I don't recommend would just be I'm Good featuring The Weeknd, and then there's another one on here that is Before Tune Gets Back with Lil Chucky as far as that kind of happens. But basically, Lil Wayne was not on that particular song Before Tune Gets Back. That one was just kind of one that I just kind of felt was like a little bit mad. I do like some of those folks from Young Money, like Lil Chucky and Lil Twist, some of those type folks. I remember them from the Young Money album. I'm gonna have to see about their mixtapes and stuff like that, but I just wasn't enjoying that one as much. And then I'm Good with The Weeknd Weeknd on there. This has The Weeknd. It doesn't have Lil Wayne on it either. But I have to say the thing about this particular song is just the fact that this was not that good. This was kind of like a prenatal kind of The Weeknd. This is back The Weeknd in 2013. That was his first big year when he was getting ready to drop an album and some of that type of stuff. So The Weeknd really blew up in like 2015, 2016, as most folks should know by this point. He was just ubiquitous with a lot of things he was just kind of ubiquitous with a lot of things in pop music as far as that kind of happens. But he just sounds a lot more half baked on this particular song. It just doesn't quite feel as developed as some of his melodies would get later on. This is just kind of more early The Weeknd type tune that just was not quite as catchy and just not as melodic as it needed to be. I mean, I like The Weeknd normally. He's one of my faves in terms of some of that concept, but that one was just not one that vibed with that well. And I'll go ahead and say, just to talk about the songs, so there's 22 songs on this particular mixtape, and there were only 4 songs that I don't recommend, and those were, I listed 2 of them for you basically before Tune Gets Back and I'm Good were 2 songs I don't recommend. And then there's 2 other songs, which I'm going to find these, one of which was Thinking About You. And then the fourth song that I didn't recommend was Type Away. So basically, I didn't really like the beat at all in Type Away. That one was kind of an awkward type one. That was just kind of an in-between type song. It's very similar to You Song. I like You Song with Chance the Rapper a little bit better than Type Away, but Type Away was just kind of one, and Type Away was a Rich Homie Quan song that just kind of had like an awkward template towards it. It was just kind of an in-between, almost kind of trap, kind of pedestrian and makeshift type tune that just didn't pull it off quite as well, I'd have to say. But then Thinking About You pretty much had the worst beat on this whole mixtape. I'm glad that there weren't more songs like this particular one. It was just kind of an awkward one as far as that pitch kind of happened. But that's about the only real true blunder I'd have to say for the most part. But yeah, this mixtape gets a 10 out of 10. But we'll go ahead and talk about some of these new songs. So basically, Live Life is like a pretty glitzy nightclub hopper, I would have to say. It reminds me of Not a Human Being Days. I would definitely feel like the first one, not the second one. But yeah, I would have to say this is like a dark carnival type beat. I would definitely have to suppose this is an overall pretty nice one. Live Life is definitely a pretty glitzy type song. Definitely like the appeal of that one. Is just very, I definitely felt like Live Life is a pretty good highlight off this particular mixtape, I would have to say. I'm glad that this is an original song and this hits pretty heavily. It's just a good kind of concept to get some of these mixtape type Lil Wayne type tunes that are new and still kind of have a highlighted pitch as far as that particularly kind of happens. This is just a dark carnival type beat. This would be a great song to hear in a nightclub in a certain sense. I definitely feel like Lil Wayne back in his prime era was definitely someone that you could have heard a mixtape song in a nightclub as far as that pitch kind of happens. But yeah, this is a free song. This is a good glitzy kind of one to kind of get. Both Lil Wayne and Euro tear up this song as far as this particularly kind of happens. It's a good concept to kind of get circa 2013 Lil Wayne, because he didn't really have a bunch of stuff that was kind of out in 2013. It was really just Human Being 2. It was really just Human Being 2 and then this particular project. So it's just some extra Lil Wayne and kind of like a quieter pocket of a time for him as far as that pitch kind of happened. Definitely like the concept of fall 2013 type Lil Wayne type vibes as far as that pitch kind of happened. Just right before he was going to drop the Carter 4. It was just kind of an in-between type pitch. Definitely like the kind of glitzy kind of nightclub. Definitely kind of like the glitzy kind of nightclub appeal of that one. Way I'm Ballin's another nice one. This is like a flossing song, I'd have to say. This is a pretty exquisite night flash, I would have to say. This is some pretty exquisite night flash, I'd have to say. This is a ritzy kind of stepping out song, definitely, and it's got some lyrical barbs on here. So this is another good nice one. This is one that probably feels like something Drake or Birdman would do, something of that pitch, just a little bit more of like a fancier type one for flossing and stunting and flexing, some of those type pitches as far as that kind of happens. Just a real kind of, really like the gloss and appeal of this particular one. This one kind of feels similar to like Bugatti by like Ace Hood and some of that type of stuff. Just some of those kind of more flashy type ones, just in a more sense, where I feel like Live Life is definitely like a nightclub kind of entry type song, just kind of being there for maybe like 30 minutes, an hour, something like that. Just one of the initial ones you'd hear. This is kind of one a little bit crazier, something that Future would do in 2013. Definitely kind of flossing type nightclub song that Future would have done in 2013. This really feels like ratchet music, I'd have to say, and that's an interesting meld for Lil Wayne to kind of cross over to some of that just kind of R and bass and ratchet type music for Lil Wayne to kind of do some of that. Some of the stuff that 2 Chainz was kind of doing around that time feels like a 2 Chainz song in some senses, I'd have to say. It's a pretty good concept. Still got that Rock's a pretty nice one. This is like a vintage kind of 2000s era drummer boy beat. Definitely like this one. This has a looming dark kind of feel, definitely, and this has a very ominous feel, I'd have to say. Really like the concept of this particular one, and this is just a splitting kind of song. Really like this pitch. Probably one of the best beats on the mixtape in terms of the original stuff, I'd have to say. It's just a very kind of ominous type one. This still got that rock. This has a haunting aesthetic that has a great pitch to kind of have just for something like that. This definitely feels like vintage 2000s era, I would have to say. Just some good concepts to kind of get that one. Definitely Lil Wayne feels at home in this particular song, I'd have to say. So that's a nice one. Devastation's another one that kind of feels like classic Dedication era, I would have to say. This is like a classic Dedication, Gutta and Wayne type bop, I would have to say. It's definitely definitely a good pitch to kind of have that gutta guts on this song. Like I was saying, this reminds me of like 2000s era. This is another one that reminds me of 2000s era Lil Wayne. I would definitely have to suppose it's vintage Lil Wayne in that sense. This is just a gutter kind of low key. The song is just some gutter kind of low key murkiness. I would have to say it's just an overall kind of pitch one. So it's still got that rock and devastation, or just some classic kind of vintage Lil Wayne from like the Carter 2, Carter 3 type eras as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just some good stuff to kind of get some of those. And then You Song's a pretty nice one. Definitely like this one. This is like a dreary kind of midday commerce of a song. I'd have to say this is like a pop rap kind of residential hopping type tune. I would definitely have to say this in between city and like the daytime. This is like 3:30 p.m. type malaise. I would definitely feel like, and this is just a great song. And this is just a great song for some snackers. Just kind of going to the gas station, some stuff like that, grocery store hopping, some stuff like that. Just picking up some snacks, some Chex Mix, some Cheetos, some stuff like that, some Pepsis, those sorts of things. It's a good pitch to kind of have some of those. That's the concept of the original songs. I'd have to say a lot of the good ones on here, like I was saying, just some good stuff. Just really like the pitches of some of these. Lil Wayne really picked the term in terms of the original songs. I definitely feel like there were plenty of these that were suited to Lil Wayne as far as that pitch kind of particularly kind of having. These were just some nice ones to overall kind of get, and they really felt like that he was at home with some of these, and they just had a lot of good sheer variety and just overall electricity that they carried. This is definitely almost like a miniature, almost like Lil Wayne EP of stuff that he was up to in the fall of 2013. And as a bonus, it's free, so that's a good concept to kind of get some of that just within that particular pitch. Just some good stuff to kind of have within that. But then basically the other 15 songs, there's just a ton of these. I would have to say there's some great ones on here, like a real Southern Fried type beat, like You Ain't Need No. That's a nice one by that's a nice one by Rocco. Definitely if Lil Wayne feels at home on that particular one. That's just a real good, excellent beat to kind of shred and stuff. Just a great song to smoke to and things like that. Just within that pitch, just a good kind of overall song to have in like some night venues and things like that. Just some good pizzazz about that one. New Slaves is a Kanye West song, and that's obviously a pretty good highlight. That's a ferocious kind of night craze of an energy, just like the Yeezus album as far as that pitch kind of happens. Fuck With Me, You Know I Got It's a pretty highlighted one. This is a pretty eviscerating one. This is a Jay-Z song, and it definitely has some pretty good night pizzazz about it. This is a pretty hype one that it gets to, so the craziness of that particular song is pretty heavily. I feel like a powerful song on this particular project is Levels by Meek Mill. This was an interesting kind of one. This is kind of Lil Wayne on more of like his I'm Not a Human Being 1 type phase. This is just kind of more of like a drill type sound, kind of the stuff that Meek Mill was kind of somewhat delving into in like the early 2010s, but it was just interesting the evolution of that by mid-late 2013 as far as that pitch kind of happens. That's just a nice one to kind of get. Fucking Problems is a nice one. This is just contemporary pop rap type stuff that ASAP Rocky was on kind of in like the spring and winter of 2013 as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just a nice one to kind of get. Pretty commercial. Definitely like the appeal of this one. This is probably one that was all over the radio back in the day, or just stuff like that as far as that pitch kind of happens. Lil Wayne revisits like some vintage kind of stuff like he was doing in like the Drought 3 and those type days, Dedication 2 type days with Cream. This is one that's Cash Rules Everything Around Me by Wu-Tang. So this is a pretty nice one to kind of rap to. There definitely need to be more beats like this on this particular album. Not to say that there's anything wrong with this project, but it's just kind of the concept we could have used more beats like this, I'd have to suppose, but it is a pretty highlighted one. Itchin's a nice one. This is a good song for the ladies as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just some ratchet women, stuff like that. Just a good trap type tune. Lil Wayne switches like a future trap type beat into like a pretty good ratchet ladies tune, I'd have to suppose. That's a pretty nice one. There's some other hits on here like Started From the Bottom. That's a pretty nice one. There's one that's Ain't Worry About Nothing. Even though Lil Wayne's not on that song, that's a pretty nice one with the French Montana tune. Euro's on there and Jaw Mills is on there, so that's a pretty good tune to kind of get that one. Bugatti's a pretty flashy one. Lil Wayne does a good job on songs like that. There's some vintage kind of drill rap. Even though drill was starting to dry up by 2013, 2014, that sort of pitch, there's a song on here called Pure Columbia that has that vintage kind of 2011, 2010 type drill as far as that pitch kind of happens. Good stuff to kind of get that. And there's just a whole bunch of these. I just would have to say there's plenty of these on here, plenty of these type songs just to kind of get just a lot of good electricity as far as these particular pitches kind of happen. It's pretty contemporary to 2013, just kind of an amalgamation of songs that were kind of popular throughout 2013, just within like the pitch of the changes that were kind of happening. As drill was starting to dry up, ratchet music was starting to blow up and those type things, and there just was a lot of commercial kind of just commercial kind of 2013 stuff on here. Just some trendy songs from 2013 as far as those pitches kind of happen. So you basically get some trends on here like drill rap and ratchet rap and some of that type of stuff. Then you get some contemporary 2013 type rap and just things. Then you get some contemporary kind of 2013 type rap like Started From the Bottom and Fucking Problems and some of those type ones, and Don't Kill My Vibe by Kendrick Lamar, some of those type ones. So it's a good pitch to kind of have that. So yeah, this Mixtape definitely gets a 10 out of 10. The social score I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 also. Despite the fact that I feel like Lil Wayne had to graft more to the times more so than they grafted to him, I still feel like the concept behind it is still a pretty outlandish kind of one that just hits pretty heavily. This is a splitting album. The lyricism's off the chain. There's some new songs on here on top of that. Pretty much has plenty of pitches. This is a mixtape. It's free, so definitely highly recommend this. This chock full of hits. This is a double mixtape, so this is basically like a double album, just kind of within the pitch. About the size, 22 songs. Just plenty of songs to kind of go out and have. Just contemporary, circa 2013. Just a good amount of things to kind of have just within that atmosphere. Lots of good trends. Ratchet music, some ratchet music, some drill music, some things like that. Some contemporary 2013. Just things of those particular type tones to kind of have just within that. Just a lot of good stuff that just kind of has that particular feel. It's just some good stuff. And then the new songs are pretty excellent. Just a lot of good nightlife and just overall kind of times. There is some day life on here a little bit. I mean, I did kind of somewhat miss like the times of like the Carter 4 with some of that makeshift type feel, but I do feel like this is pretty oriented just towards evenings and nights out as far as that kind of happens with a little bit of snackage tunes kind of thrown in as well. It's kind of a good concept, and then some vintage kind of southern rap type tunes as well. So that's kind of the concept about it. So 10 social. In terms of the future, like Lil Wayne dropped a mixtape, and in terms of the future, like Lil Wayne dropped a mixtape in the fall of 2023 called The Fix Before the Six as far as that particular pitch kind of happens. So it's a good concept to kind of get that. And then he also was featured on like the Welcome to Collar Grove project with 2 Chainz as far as that pitch kind of happens. So it's some good stuff to kind of get within that field. He's supposedly working on the Carter 6, so we'll see what happens with that. But this is definitely like a pretty classic double mixtape here. It continues like the dedication legacy, 10 out of 10 project as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just some good stuff to kind of get. Lots of good social appeal. Has plenty of good nightlife, evening life, snack life, things like that. Just some good stuff for munchies, smoke tunes, things like that. Just outing songs, plenty of good social festivities, I'd have to say. So I once again highly recommend this.